Hello and welcome to Pod People, the show where three good boys talk about three spooky movies. I'm Matisse Van Rossum, and I'm joined in the booth today, as always, by Ben Sheets.
Hello, hello.
And Eugene Lundeen.
Hello there. Great to be back.
How's your arm doing, Eugene?
Oh, well, you know, they got it bandaged up, but, well, I gotta say, they told me to not gnaw at it or anything, and I told them, well, Doc, it still smells like turkey, and I gave it a little nibble. I had to go back to the hospital, but they gave me this really cool hook as a replacement for right now.
Yeah, I've noticed that. That's a nice-looking hook.
I don't like how you kind of dug it into the table, though.
Well, I was trying to still set up the equipment. I know that I want to make myself useful on this show, and I think...
Yeah, we're not going to be able to keep you on the show if you keep messing up my furniture.
It's okay, because they told me that if I don't break it, that they'll give me, like, one of those nice fake plastic hands. But I asked them if they could still put, like, little hooks on the edges so I could still pick up stuff really well.
How many times have you gotten your hook stuck, like, in the wall or something?
Well, you know, my biggest problem is that I toss around a lot in my sleep, so the doctor did say that my eye would be fine, that I would be able to see in it again. But
is it always just going to be white like that?
He said that we'd have to just let time go by and see what happens to it, but it might be white. And the other one might be completely blood red, but I can still see fine. And that's another reason I apologize. I was having a lot of trouble seeing when I was setting up the equipment. So
I didn't want to say anything about it, but your eye's oozing a little bit. You should...
Oh, okay, let me... Oh, wrong hand.
Oh, no, not the hook.
Oh, God. Oh, the hook. Oh. Okay, guys, I'm gonna... No, it's fine. It's fine. I'm just gonna clean this up for a little sec. Ben, why don't you tell us what's going on in the movie news world right now while I clean up this pus and shit?
All right, so we have a story about Universal possibly trying to get Guillermo del Toro to be kind of the head of the monsters multiverse that they're trying to do.
The dark universe.
We're gonna go back to the 1930s and start that up again.
This is the weirdest thing to me, that the dark universe is even a thing. Like, is it just Universal's ploy to try to keep up with, like, the Marvel and DC cinematic universes? Because this is really stupid.
I feel like if they didn't interconnect them, it would be fine. I'm okay with them doing more, old school horror. Like, get a Frankenstein reboot or something.
There have been so many of those, though.
Yeah.
And there have been like 3 or 4 Frankenstein movies in the last decade, and none of them have been even noteworthy.
Yeah, they've all been bad.
Well, that's something we have to consider, too, back in, like, the 50s. That monster mash movies of that sort, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, those were, you could say, cinematic universes for their time, and maybe they want to try and relive some of that old action. Hopefully the people...
I don't know if I'd really call that a cinematic universe so much as just like a crossover, like Alien versus Predator or Freddy versus Jason.
Are we going to get an Abbott and Costello Meet the Wolfman remake?
Oh, they could digitally restore Abbott and Costello and we just have them. They'd be scarier than the monsters.
The reason I feel like this is such a misstep is because it's once again just them trying to cash in on nostalgia that people have. But these movie monsters that they're trying to reboot are, I don't think, really relevant or scary today.
I'll tell you what, though. I'd rather have a horror universe than a superhero.
I agree, but
mega franchise.
But if you're gonna do like a horror, expanded cinematic universe, then come up with something new. Come up with new monsters.
Yeah, but what if it was all like reimaginings of the originals? Like, for example, Shape of Water. I've heard Shape of Water is very much like Creature from the Black Lagoon in a lot of ways.
That's definitely true.
So what if it's just like they take these original old movies and reimagine them into a new kind of cinematic universe.
That could be cool, potentially. The Shape of the Water does look good, and I love Guillermo del Toro, and it's been getting some pretty good preliminary reviews. But I'm seeing that he turned down Universal's offer to take control of the Dark Universe. I don't know if maybe they'll try to get him in again, or maybe he'll change his mind. Honestly, I don't even know if the Dark Universe is still going to be a thing with how bad The Mummy did.
Yeah, The Mummy kind of flopped. I do have a list here of all the movies they had planned out, and I kind of want to just go through them, because they have info about all the ones they'd planned too. We have The Mummy, obviously, already came out. Lack of Brendan Fraser really made that movie bomb. I'm gonna just put that out there.
I think so too.
It reveals too Tom Cruise isn't as bankable as he used to be.
Yeah, you can't just have a Mummy movie where you replace Brendan Fraser with Tom Cruise. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, sacrilege.
And I didn't see that movie because it looked fucking terrible, and seems like it was terrible, but I know that fucking Dr. Jekyll is in it, and he's supposed to be like the fucking
God.
He's like the Tony Stark of the Dark Universe. He's gonna assemble the team of all of these monsters. I think it was
against good people.
I think was that Russell Crowe in
Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
So the next movie they had planned is supposed to come out Valentine's Day 2019 is Bride of Frankenstein.
How romantic.
Wow.
They're skipping over Frankenstein and going right to Bride of Frankenstein. That's interesting.
Feminism. But apparently they were trying to get Angelina Jolie to be Bride of Frankenstein.
Oh my god.
Wow, I think she's better than that at this point. I don't know.
I think there are also better people that they could find. Like, Angelina Jolie's not bad, but is she really even that relevant these days?
But okay, after that we have The Invisible Man. Johnny Depp is supposed to be the Invisible Man.
No!
Which, I mean, having an invisible Johnny Depp is probably the most bearable Johnny Depp.
But I think his voice is what I want to hear the least.
True. Ugh.
Does that mean that Johnny Depp is the Claude Rains of our time?
Oh, God.
The thought of that is terrifying in and of itself.
I'm just imagining, like, all of the awful Johnny Depp's characters put into one as the Invisible Man.
It's just Mordecai, but he's invisible.
It's apparently being written by the guy who wrote Charlie's Angels.
Oh my god! I'm seeing they're rebooting the Wolfman again.
Yep, because that worked the first couple times.
Yeah, they weren't satisfied with Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins.
It says it's being written by the guy who wrote Prisoners, though.
Weird.
Which is
That I could
strange.
Could be good, I guess.
Maybe. How would they ground the Wolfman, though?
I don't know, dude. I don't know how they're gonna do any of this shit, honestly.
Okay, and then after that we get Dracula Untold 2.
Oh, good, because that's what that movie that's what that movie needed, a sequel.
Because everyone remembers the first Dracula Untold.
Yeah,
I know. I
what
do.
the fuck? Yeah.
That's my favorite movie of all time. You guys don't talk shit about Dracula Untold.
Van Helsing reboot. After
Of course.
Yeah, there's no hype around these movies. How did they try and figure out this marketing scheme and this schedule and not consider the fact that no one was interested in these movies?
I think this is all a mistake.
Yeah.
This is all such a mistake.
We have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Which it says has not been announced yet, but you can't have Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll in The Mummy and then not have a standalone, I think.
They have a note here that they claim Noah Hawley might be attached to it.
Oh my god.
But it looks like it's just pure speculation.
Yeah, that seems like fake news.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Phantom of the Opera again. I'm sure that will do well.
You know, the thing is that it will probably do well if they do it, because there's so many people that are super into musicals.
Yeah, but you know, if they do the Phantom of the Opera for the Dark Universe, it's not gonna be a musical. It's gonna be gritty and serious, and none of the people who like the musical are gonna enjoy that.
No, they're gonna just make it like Sweeney Todd or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Oh man!
probably
And then when they finally do the Avengers of the Dark Universe, the Phantom just keeps singing at inappropriate, breaking out into song, and all of the other monsters are just like, "Dude, this is not the time for that."
Yeah, they're like,
He doesn't.
chill.
That's a great idea. Actually, he is incapable of expressing himself in any format other than song. He sings all of his lines.
And then after that, we have the creature from the Black Lagoon, which, I mean, Shape of Water might be that, essentially, without the heavy-handed connectedness. Finally, out of left field, the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh shit!
What the fuck?
You know, handicapped people that look different from you. Obviously, monsters.
That's definitely gonna go over well in this day and age. People are really gonna love to see somebody with a physical deformity being labeled a monster. That's gonna be great. Fuck, dude. Movies were a mistake.
For real.
What the fuck are we doing? This is gonna bomb for sure. All of these movies are gonna bomb.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way. And especially because Guillermo del Toro doesn't want to work on them.
Is there a way you could do these right, though? Do you think? Because I think there's a possibility.
Yes, I guess my instinct would be to say no, fuck no. But if Guillermo del Toro was working on it, then maybe.
I think there's two ways you could go about it to make it fun and good. You could either make them all very campy and schlocky,
I think that
and
is the
dumb
way to
fun,
do it.
and have them, somewhat self-aware and still interconnected.
But
but
the problem is both sides have been played already with the Marvel and DC movies. It's either campy, goofy self-awareness, or it's dark and gritty, fucking pseudo existentialist.
yeah, I mean,
Well,
DC has proven that dark and gritty doesn't work. Yeah.
No, and I think with these specific like old monsters from the 30s, I think the only way to do it successfully is play up the campiness, because nobody's scared by mummies or vampires or wolfmen or invisible people. Like, that's been done. Everybody's used to it. So if they're gonna remake it, you gotta schlock it up, I think. I think that's the only choice you have.
Yeah, but then we're gonna get some dumb shit like the Wolfman and Seth Rogen fucking teaming up. And
I would rather
I would love that.
I would rather sit in these movies and laugh than
Wolfman played by Danny McBride.
fuck yes, dude. That's what I want.
Okay, all
no,
right,
I want
wait.
that.
Yeah.
Wolfman played by Danny McBride. Fucking the Hunchback played by Seth Rogen. All right.
I was
Well,
gonna say Jonah Hill.
oh, dude, that's even better. Jonah Hill could be Van Helsing. I think that has legs.
Oh, that's
I
great.
feel like you have to make the Van Helsing character the least Van Helsing person, though.
Well, right, Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill would be good. Only if it was like fat Jonah Hill, though.
Well, right, yeah, not like skinny, serious actor Jonah Hill, like Superbad Jonah Hill, or Wolf of Wall Street Jonah Hill.
Yeah.
Yes, I love
good.
this.
Yeah,
Very funny.
Is this the future that we want for the?
This is very
Universe?
good. Universal, take notes. We've done half your job for you. We've cast all of your movies.
In fact, let's just make all of the cinematic universes like connected here.
Oh yeah, I want to see Dark Universe versus the Avengers. Movies
were a mistake.
Movies were a mistake, and on that note, let's talk about some movies. So our theme for this week is our first director retrospective. We're going to be talking about the films of Mike Flanagan, who has had such breakout hits as Oculus and Hush, and most recently the Netflix original Gerald's Game, based on the novel by Stephen King. So we're going to be talking about his first film, Absentia, and then Oculus, and we'll close out with Gerald's Game. Mike Flanagan is a director who has a special place in my heart because all but 2 of his movies, Absentia and Ouija, were filmed in my hometown of Fairhope, Alabama.
A lot of horror movies being filmed in Fairhope.
Yeah, Get Out this year was shot there, so it's blowing up, and I have some friends who do special effects who have worked on all of these movies. So I think Mike Flanagan is a director with a lot of promise. He's had some misses, I think, but I think more successes than anything else. But with that, let's jump into Absentia, his first film.
Yeah, so Absentia was made around 2011, I believe. And it was a Kickstarter project. This was made back when he had a couple award-winning student films, and this was shot in California as opposed to all the other movies he had shot in Fairhope. It's about 2 sisters, Callie and Trisha. Callie, recovering drug addict, is moving in with Trisha, who has lost her husband, has been missing for the past 7 years. It follows her mostly coping with that situation, trying to move past it, but
she's going through the process of declaring him dead in absentia.
Yes, dead in absentia. So there's where the movie title comes in. Trisha is 7 months pregnant, and Callie runs into this man in rags. He's all dirtied up. He looks like he's been through a rough time.
Very homeless.
Yes, very homeless. Severe homelessness, this man. Who is also played by Doug Jones, which I hope this isn't a spoiler or anything, but he is not in any sort of special effects. He is just regular old Doug Jones.
Well, in bum makeup.
In bum makeup, yes.
Very homeless.
Yeah, certainly no eyes on his hands or anything like that. From there on, very strange things begin to happen in the house and around her, and they all seem to be linked to this tunnel near her home. I think as a first feature film, it lacks in a couple places. I think, Matisse, if you want to try and explain a little bit of what you think, we can jump off from there.
All right. Well, I think this movie has a lot of potential, and I'll go ahead and get it right out there. I don't think this is a bad film. It definitely takes some interesting missteps that sort of hurt it. And I think, and this is one of the only times I'll ever say this, because I don't think a big budget is necessary to making a good film, but I think the low budget really hurt this movie. I
don't know if I agree.
I don't know
I'll get into it, but keep going.
And I think that's just that Mike Flanagan's concept for this sort of goes beyond the budget that he was working with. To fill in a little more of the gaps, Trisha begins having these very intense lucid dreams where her husband in some sort of ghostly form keeps appearing to her and making scary faces and shouting. And her shrink tells her that, oh, this is just because she's coping with having to declare him dead finally, but she thinks that there might be something else going on. At the start, it feels a lot like a sort of generic ghost movie, but it takes a sharp left turn in the third act. Trisha's husband actually shows back up, and he is emaciated and malnourished, and they find animal bones in his stomach, and he won't talk about where he's been or what's happened to him, but he is seeming to be in a great state of fear all the time, constantly looking over his shoulder like something is coming for him. We learn that the tunnel is home to basically a troll. I'm just going to throw that out there. It's basically a troll.
Well, we can't say because we never see any sort of creature.
Well, that's true. We never see what it actually looks like, but there's the scene where her husband is reading the Three Billy Goats Gruff. and he's talking about how it doesn't look anything like that. It looks more like an insect. So there's some big insect monster that lives like inside the walls of the tunnel, and if you trade with it, i.e. leave trinkets by the tunnel, then it will start to trade things with you, and eventually it will come kidnap you and take you into some dark, evil realm under the tunnel and does stuff to you. We never really find that out. That's the thing. Like, none of this shit starts happening until like the last 30 minutes of the movie.
That's true.
Conceptually, it's fresh, it's interesting, it's original, but none of it ever gets fleshed out at all.
Yeah, that's the problem I had with it. You know, I don't think it was the budget necessarily that did it. I think it was that they were trying to do too much with it. I think if they just stuck to like the Lovecraftian type of tunnel monster, unseeable entity that like takes people and puts them into the madness inside of the walls. That's awesome. That's really good. But then they tried to, you know, muddy the water with like ghosty type of stuff, and like you kind of see the creature at points, but you know, the budget definitely wasn't enough to do that stuff well. I feel like if they would have just played that completely subtly, it would have worked.
And if they had started playing that earlier in the movie. And it's never explained either why the people who are being like targeted by this creature like see these apparitions of their loved ones who have gone missing. She was seeing her husband in dreams. Like, he wasn't actually there. And then somehow he managed to escape and he came home, and then the monster came back to get him. That's one of those things where it's frustratingly ambiguous. Not ambiguous in a good way. There's a lot of plot holes in this movie, I think.
One problem that I had with the movie is that because this was something that he did after all of these student films, that it doesn't seem to really escape that. A lot of the things feel very flat with the filmmaking, just nothing very interesting in terms of visuals, and also that it just feels like a bunch of out-of-work actors that they found around California to play all these characters. I never really felt anyone did a convincing job.
Besides Doug Jones, who I thought was great,
because Doug Jones is the
he's
only
barely in it.
Yes.
I will agree with you, and then I will disagree with you on two different things. I definitely agree that it felt a lot like a student film. Like, while I was watching it, I'm like, this looks good for a student film, but bad for like a professional film, if you know what I mean. Flatness is a great way to describe a lot of it. The lighting, the shot composition, and for some reason, he put like a vignette like at the corners of everything. That was very confusing.
Throughout, like, the whole movie.
But the whole movie, it's like vignetted, and that did not make any sense to me whatsoever. But what I will disagree with you on, I didn't find the acting offensively bad. Doug Jones was definitely the best for the little bit that he's in there. But I think there are few and far between, but there are several moments in the movie that I found genuinely quite effective in terms of the characters. And I think that that's one good thing about this movie, is that we get plenty of character development. Not so much story development, but you definitely get to know the characters, and they feel three-dimensional, you know?
Yeah, I would agree somewhat.
Especially with like Trisha's whole conflict, you know, with having to declare her husband dead after all of these years without knowing anything about what happened to him, yet while simultaneously trying to move on, and she's having that fling with the detective who's been searching for her husband. And I don't know if they ever say it flat out, but it's implied that he's the father of her child that she's pregnant with. And the stuff with Callie and her struggling with her drug addiction and how she ends up relapsing when shit goes bad, and she's trying to be there for her sister. but at the same time also is struggling with her own demons and has difficulty balancing the two. I think that stuff is pretty solid.
Well, there's certainly no issue with the characters themselves. I just don't find the actors behind them did a very good job.
I think it's hit and miss. There were several moments that I was actually quite impressed with. My whole sense of this movie is just hit or miss all around. When it's good, it's good. When it's bad, it's bad. And it flip-flops between those.
Yeah,
those
it
two
could have used a lot more consistency to it, for sure. And I feel like if they would have played with less, especially with what they were trying to do with the tunnel stuff, I think it would have been more effective because it would have streamlined it a little bit more.
And I did think that the scene where Callie comes across Doug Jones in the tunnel is actually pretty good. Maybe one of the best scenes in the movie.
Yeah,
because
it's really good.
It's pretty genuinely creepy, you know? Like, because when she comes across him, he's like sprawled out across the tunnel and he looks like he's dead. And she's having that moment where she's like, oh God, there's this homeless person in the road. I'm going to have to like step over him. Like, can I do it without him noticing me? Oh, fuck, no, now he noticed me. And he keeps begging for help. And she assumes that he just wants money or food because he's homeless. But really, he's escaped from this silverfish Lovecraftian nightmare monster and actually needs help. So I thought that stuff is really good too, but then it just sort of falls apart again and then builds itself back up. And I think you're right, Ben, that if they really wanted to make this movie way better, ditch all of like the weird ghost shit that happens in like the first 45 minutes and from very early on imply that there's something living in the tunnel and focus on that and flesh that out, instead of throwing all that shit in the last 30 minutes and trying to explain it. I don't know.
I think they could have expanded Doug Jones's son's character more. We get him a little bit. He leaves like a plastic bag with a little puppy in it.
Well, yeah, that's
feed the wall.
We find that out at the end, but when we first see him is when Callie goes back to leave food for Doug Jones. And he shows up and he's got this garbage bag and he's like, don't leave that there. And she's like, why? He's like, just don't do it. And then he sets down the bag and then walks away. I thought that was interesting too, because that's when she like trades with the creature for the first time and she gets on its radar. And then it just leaves her like a pile of like coins and trinkets. Yeah. Which I thought that was really fucking funny, actually. I couldn't take that too seriously.
But I feel like if you would have expanded his story a little bit more, if we got a few more glimpses of what was going on there, it would have felt a little better than how it is now, where, they try to explain away the killings or disappearances on him because he had dead animals and stuff.
Right, he's a scapegoat, sort of. What did you guys think about the climax of the film when the creature comes and takes Trisha, and then Callie goes to try to trade her life for Trisha's? I thought that the climax is actually extremely anticlimactic.
I think one problem, I never really felt we got a full grasp on what this creature wanted.
Exactly.
Or what it could do, and so it's so underdeveloped that you never really feel the tension or the force behind it because, well, it kind of just does whatever it wants. Because if you do trade with it and it gives you stuff, but other times you will trade with it and it doesn't do anything, you just die, then it doesn't...
No, I agree. Its motivations are not clear, and while I normally don't have a problem with ambiguity, I have a hard time caring if there's not something offered. All we know is that it takes people into a nightmare realm where it presumably tortures them for some reason that's never really specified.
I like that it kept some of that unknown.
I think
felt very
some of
Lovecraftian in how it did it. But I agree that like they shouldn't have started to set up rules for it if they weren't going to go all the way. They should have either left it completely open and unknowable, without trinkets or trading,
Right.
or gone into it a little bit more.
Right. And I think at that point when Callie goes to try to trade her life for Trisha's, I was expecting something more than what we got. And I think this is a part where the budget definitely comes into it, because all we have is her going into the tunnel and she keeps shouting trade. And then you hear the thing moving around in the walls, and then it just gives her fucking Trisha's unborn baby. It just like rips the baby out and like leaves it in the tunnel, which we don't see at all. We just sort of see an out of focus, like dead fetus in the background. And then Callie starts to run, and then she disappears. And that's supposed to be like the climax. Like, it's really short. It's not particularly exciting. That just did not do really anything for me. Conceptually, I think it was fine, but the way it was executed, like, that part was over, and then we get a little bit of a wrap up, and then the movie's over, and I don't know. I was just really underwhelmed by all of that.
Right. It feels very ineffective. I mean, you have the ghost story in the beginning and sort of this extension of the grief or what the main character is going through with the husband showing up in ghost form. It does not just happen in the dreams. She also sees him in closets, around corners, so something that lurks around her. And then you add in the creature in the tunnel, which these two things clash, and both of them don't really go anywhere.
To talk briefly about the ghost husband stuff, what I did appreciate about some of it, at least, was that when she was like seeing him in her waking life, they didn't do that as like just a bunch of obnoxious jump scares with loud noises. He was just kind of there in some shots.
Right.
And like they were doing a lot of like the generic like creepy ghost thing where like the pale face and the eyes rolled back in the head and the wide open mouth. At least they didn't like just have him like cut to that and then like loud noise like you're supposed to jump. The only time they really did that is like the first time she sees him downstairs.
Outside of her dream, right? She's closing a door and the ghost is hiding right behind the door, and he shouts something really fast after.
Oh yeah, there was that. I actually was not referring to that, but I forgot about that. Yeah, and they did like the distorted voice, like you know what you did, something like that. That was really fucking stupid.
It was silly. It was funnier more than it was effectively scary or anything like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, overall, this movie just... if it were not done by Mike Flanagan with everything he's done at this point now, it would honestly feel like something I'd catch on like a midnight movie DVD or...
I think what is so frustrating about it for me is that the clear potential that it has. That when it is working, it feels really good, and then it just lets you down. The potential is so strong, I think, that this could have been a really, really great movie, but the way that it lets you down just makes it all the more frustrating because of that.
I think we've said all we really can say about this movie. Just to get into ratings, for me, this has moments that show that Mike Flanagan did have a lot of ideas behind this film. Certainly it may be overstuffed. There was potential, and certainly it is a good thing that he was eventually recognized for the things he did in this film. For me, I think this is about a 2.5 pod film that it's something if you want to understand Mike Flanagan as a director more, but I don't think it offers much else.
Yeah. Well, it obviously caught somebody's eye in the right way, that it allowed him to go on to make some of his more successful films, you know. It obviously, that potential was spotted by somebody, which is good, because if they had just chosen to write this off, much better movies like Oculus and Hush might have never been made, you know, or funded. I think that for the potential that it exhibits and for the good parts, I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. Not a terrible movie. I would probably watch it again at some point, but it's just kind of boring at times, I think.
I mean, this movie had a lot of potential. And I really like some of the conceptual things it was doing with the insanity and the wall monster. But I have to agree with you guys, like, it could have been done so much better. And I feel like it was trying to do too much. And if it would have streamlined the storyline and focused it a little bit more, it would have been a much more effective movie as a whole. So I would give this a 3 out of 5 as well. It's worth checking out, especially if you like Oculus or Hush or any of the other Mike Flanagan movies. But it's not the first one you should watch.
Definitely. And that gives us a solid rating of 2.8 pods for Absentia. And with that, we will transition into Oculus. Oculus is a 2013 film, the first film that Mike Flanagan shot in Fairhope. This is his second film right after Absentia. And it is based on a short film that he did prior to Absentia called Oculus Chapter 3, The Man with a Plan, which is an interesting title for a short film, but I have not seen that short film, so I don't know how it is, but apparently it won some awards and enabled him to get his Kickstarter for Absentia going. So Oculus is about some sort of malevolent entity that lives in this giant mirror that seems to feed on living energy and basically kills people by making them go crazy and killing themselves in some form or another, and then they become a part of the mirror. What did you guys think of this movie?
Well, certainly it is a big step up from Absentia. It does show that Mike Flanagan, when given a budget, can still make a movie that can be entertaining and effective. It has a lot in terms of playing around with the mind or the state of these characters, because as they try and document this mirror, because the sister wants proof that there was a spirit within it and their parents were not just crazy. Constantly the mirror is playing tricks on them, showing them things that aren't actually there, causing them to do things they don't remember doing themselves, moving cameras around of those sorts, bringing them into their childhood memories, which very skillfully is interwoven between the present. Because one thing we did not mention, Mike Flanagan has edited all of his movies that he has directed since Absentia. Yeah,
which I think is really cool, and I think definitely the strongest thing about this movie is how, as it goes on, it really, really well interweaves the past and the present. It's almost like they're happening simultaneously.
Yeah, the fluidity between the two storylines is great. Sometimes even take a single shot between the two. You know, you'd have like the young people in a shot and you'd pan over and then it would be the older versions of them, or something like that, or you would combine both of them in the same shot. He does a great job of, you know, combining the two storylines so it feels organic and doesn't feel forced.
He's a very solid editor.
Absolutely. I really like this movie. I feel like it took a lot of the concepts and ideas of Absentia and developed them further and streamlined it like I was wanting from Absentia.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of similarities between the two. You know, you have that unseeable evil, whether it's the tunnel in Absentia or the mirror in this movie. You have the sibling relationship, where one has just gotten out of some sort of medical care.
Well, yeah, that's another thing that I think is really cool, is that the brother who was put in the insane asylum has been, after all of this time in the asylum, has been convinced that everything that happened when they were kids was him losing his mind, or them trying to cope with their father imprisoning and killing their mother, and so that they have sort of projected that as a supernatural entity. He is sort of the straight man for a while to the sister's more eccentric character. She remembers everything, And so she has set up this elaborate plan to document the force within the mirror and then to destroy it, so she can exonerate her brother for the murder of their parents. So I think that that's really cool, where it's not just both of them trying to work together against this entity. It's also her having to reconvince her brother that all of this shit actually happened and that it wasn't just all in their heads, you know?
Which is something that I like in horror movies when they try and do it, is to create doubt in what is true or what is false. If
Yes.
the spirit is actually there, or if they are the delusions of this mentally unstable family. You could say that the brother and sister could just be hallucinating, just like their parents may have just gone crazy. And so they try and lay out enough backstory with the family and what happened that it does create that sense of that the other way could make just as much sense as an actual spirit in the mirror.
And in terms of the mirror itself, I like the ambiguity. In this case, I really enjoy the ambiguity as opposed to an Absentia, where you don't know if it's like a spirit or something that's living in the mirror, or if it's the mirror itself. What it really does to these people, it just causes them to hallucinate, and then they eventually die in some way. Like at one point, the sister Kaylee is like reading the history of the mirror. That's called
Yes, in a gigantic exposition dump.
in a big old exposition dump.
Justify through her recording of the mirror. She has a
Yes.
whole bunch of cameras set up,
Yes.
trying to document it every which way.
Yes, and I think that that's a good way to do it, to not just have the exposition, but to have a reason for it. She's setting this whole thing up as like as an experiment that she's documenting. So she's explaining everything to the camera as she goes along, and we learn that this mirror, like everybody who's ever owned it, has died in some mysterious way, like a woman who died of dehydration while sitting in a tub full of water, stuff like that. It gives you just enough detail to make you interested and to make you buy it, but without over explaining it. It's become an obsession for her. Like, she definitely has a mania about her. Like, she has to prove this right. Like, she has to make people think that she and her brother aren't crazy. And I think that she does that really well. She's played by Karen Gillan of Doctor Who fame. I think she does a pretty damn good job, honestly.
Yeah.
I think the acting is all around pretty solid. I think the least impressive acting comes from Brenton Thwaites, who plays the present version of the brother. I think he's not bad, but just kind of underwhelming.
Right, and he's been in a lot of very weird movies. He's been in Gods of Egypt and Maleficent.
Oh.
He plays a very generic, like, pretty boy kid.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, he's the straight man to her more obsessive character, you know? So they play off each other pretty well. And the parents, too, I think do a really good job. The mom's played by Katie Sackhoff, who I think is in Battlestar Galactica.
Sounds right.
I think that's where she's famous from. And the father is by Rory Cochrane.
Rory Cochrane, yes, from Argo. He's been in Scanner Darkly, Dazed and Confused as well. He plays the big pothead hippie dude in that film.
Yeah, I thought he did a
Right.
good job, and the kids are surprisingly good
Yes,
too.
no, great.
Especially the young Kaylee, played by Annalise Basso. I think she does a really good job. So
You want to know one funny thing? So they emphasize throughout the movie how you can't like damage the mirror or it'll like fight back.
like it won't let you.
yeah. When she's taking the mirror home in present day, you see through the window them like packing it into the back of the truck, and they're just like throwing it back there. Like they
did
don't
not
really
notice that
care
at all.
that much.
Maybe the mirror didn't want to fight back until it was in a place where it could do that.
Yeah,
that would be
I
funny.
guess.
That would be funny as shit if it just like started attacking these just like moving guys who were moving it.
they pack it into the back of the van and then just lie down in front of the van.
Just lie down behind the back tires and just let somebody run them over. That'd be funny as shit.
No, the movie plays with the mirror really, really well for the most part. The mirror's kind of a troll.
Yes.
It feeds the people hallucinating random objects, whether it's light bulbs or plates.
Yeah, like that's a really great scene when Karen Gillan picks up an apple and bites into it, and then we see that she was biting into a light bulb instead. But then it turns out she wasn't biting into a light bulb. Yeah, the mirror is definitely a troll. It feels like a good villain, the mirror, in the same way that the tunnel in Absentia had the potential to be a good villain.
The way it had you guessing what was real and what wasn't really worked to its advantage.
Because by the end of the movie, you really are questioning everything, like the reality of anything that's happening.
Well, yeah, especially when Karen Gillan's character, I can't remember.
Kaylee.
Yeah, Kaylee. Especially when Kaylee sees her, like, boyfriend come in the house and she, like, stabs him.
Oh, yeah.
But she's not sure if it's reality or just the mirror playing tricks on her. Ultimately, it's still kind of ambiguous. I think she did, actually.
Yeah,
because they show that
because
she thinks she's holding a plate, which earlier in the film we see in their childhood, their mother was chained up by their dad and was eating pieces of plate. And so she sees one of those, stabs her boyfriend, thinks that it's all hallucination because of that, but it ends up being a vase that she kicked because the mirror apparently kills plants that are around, and so
right. Well, it feeds on living energy, so the plants always die around it first. And I also think the way that they portray the parents' descent into madness is really good, where the kids are like playing outside and they look in the window of their dad's office and see like this other woman in there and then ask him about it at the dinner table. So then the mom thinks that he's having an affair. So that sort of like starts to make her go crazy, whereas the mirror is exerting its influence directly on the dad, so he's going crazy for that reason.
I wish they would have fleshed out the mother's insanity a little bit more.
Because they make one point to it when she's looking at her C-section scar and it starts to rot and bleed, and so you could say that that's part of the manifestation of her stresses with the family and her children now, because her marriage seems to be falling apart.
Right, and how she feels like because of that, like she's not pretty anymore. You know, that's why her husband is cheating on her. So yeah, I think that's one thing that Mike Flanagan does really well is physical manifestations of like internal conditions, you know,
absolutely,
the state of the mind. I think that's
every one of his movies. He does.
I think that's
well.
one of his really, really strong suits. Well, let's talk about the climax of this movie.
Yes, this is when it really begins to show more of what happened to them in their childhood, because then we get to see what exactly led to that moment when the mother and father were killed.
Right, and I really like that because we don't just learn about the past through like one big flashback. At a certain point, like the climax of what happened when they were kids is happening at the same time now, you know. Mike Flanagan is really good at editing that together to make it feel fluid. At the end, Karen Gillan has a kill switch for the mirror setup. It's a boat anchor on a pendulum with weights suspended from the ceiling. And if they don't reset a timer every hour, it'll swing down into the mirror. And at a certain point, the mirror defends itself by making Karen Gillan stand right in front of it, and her brother does not see her there, and he tries to kill the mirror by setting off the kill switch, and the anchor swings down into back of Karen Gillan's head and kills her. I thought that was a really great moment. This is like the third time I've seen this movie, but the first time I saw that was I thought that was
Yeah.
a very, very effective scene. So then when the cops show up, once again, it appears like the brother has killed his family.
Yet again, the mirror is the master troll, just putting this helpless brother into jail yet again.
Man, one of my actual greatest regrets in life is that I had an opportunity to get on the set of this movie, because I was fresh out of high school when it was being filmed, and it was actually like 4 or 5 houses down from my friend Justin's house. So, and I knew people who were working on it. The guys who designed the mirror and built the mirror were friends of mine, and they offered me a chance to come on set, and my fucking job would not give me off. And so I had to go to work. And honestly, that job was fucking terrible. And I should have just quit then. I should have been like, I have an opportunity to be on a movie set. I want to make movies. This is my thing. Like, fuck you guys. Instead, I let that slip past me. And I regret it greatly, because it would have been super cool to be on the set of this movie.
That is a damn shame, especially with it being in hometown and all that.
I did, through my friends, get commissioned to make some foam board anchor heads that they were gonna use for like props for when the thing hit Karen Gillan, but they didn't ever end up using those, so I made them for nothing. Oh well.
One thing I want to ask you guys about some of the moments in this movie are, you see like apparitions of the people the mirror has killed in the past, especially towards the climax. Was that really necessary, seeing them?
I think it's necessary only to imply that the mirror basically like absorbs these people into themselves. Like how at the end, when it cuts back and forth between the young boy and the adult brother being put into the back of a cop car, and both times he looks back to the house, and the first time he sees the apparitions of both of his parents standing in the window, and the second time his sister has joined them. And I like that. Yeah. But I think that would have been way out of left field if they hadn't included the apparitions previously. And also they needed to do it to establish that there was the mysterious woman in Dad's office, you know, that makes the mom start to go crazy because she thinks he's cheating on her.
Yeah, I mean, I like the implication of, you know,
maybe we didn't need to see quite so much.
Yeah,
of them.
I think they overused them a little bit. I like the shot where you see all of them like surrounding the two right by the mirror. I thought that was really effective.
Yeah,
but other times, you know, they just kind of appear for kind of
certain times they're
horror.
Not quite necessary. What I did think was cool, at least about the design of those ghosts, is the mirrored contacts, so their eyes are reflective like the mirror. I thought that was a pretty cool touch. I did get to meet the makeup artist for that movie. That was one thing I did get to do. I think he also did a lot of the makeup on The Walking Dead, or at least the first few seasons. So that was very cool. But yeah, I agree with you that sometimes they didn't feel quite necessary, that they seemed to just sort of be like moments for jump scares. Like, there's a ghost there.
Yeah.
But at certain times it was really effective.
Yeah, I thought it cheapened some of the horror a little bit, because I think
I can agree with that.
The subtlety is one of the things that makes this movie work best.
Yes, I agree. Before we wrap up Oculus, I do want to mention the score. I think the score is really good in this movie. It's very simple and it's very minimal, which is why I like it so much. But anytime there's stuff with the mirror, there's just like that really deep strobing bass note that I think is really like atmospheric and cool, but I like the minimalism of it a lot. I think it was really effective. I think the editing and the art design and the music are definitely like the highlights of this movie. Shout out to the boys at Bruce Larson Arts for making that cool ass mirror.
All right, let's jump into ratings. So I guess I'll start. I think this movie was really solid, really worth checking out, especially if you're looking for a smart horror movie, contemporary horror movie. It's one of the best in the recent decade.
For sure.
There's minor flaws in it. You know, I feel like they could have done a little less with the ghost, and but I love the fluidity of the time, having you guess what's real and what wasn't was very, very effective. So I'd give this movie a solid 4 out of 5 pods.
Yeah, I think you summed that up really well. Good movie, not perfect, but very enjoyable to watch. Definitely worth seeing. Definitely put Mike Flanagan on the map, like for real, at least on my map. So yeah, I'll echo that exactly. 4 out of 5.
I will have to agree that this is overall an entertaining movie. I think this is a good time, definitely watching.
Yeah.
So 4 out of 5 for me.
Awesome. So 4 across the board. I think the only last thing I need to say is this movie is cerebral without being patronizing.
Yes.
Which I think is something that it does very well, and that most cerebral movies don't do. They come across as patronizing.
Yeah, it's smart without being
Pretentious.
talky. You know,
And talky,
they're
yeah.
not like just spouting out philosophical bullshit at you.
Right.
I also want to mention WWE.
Oh yeah,
distributed-
WWE distributed this movie. Fuck yeah. Let's go, Vince. Maybe the only good movie that WWE has ever produced or distributed.
I heard that in the original draft of the screenplay, Bill Goldberg was supposed to play the mirror. But
Yeah,
he
I think
had
I think I heard
scheduling
that
conflicts.
too. And Karen Gillan, young Karen Gillan, was supposed to be played by Kane. Kane! All right, so we're jumping 3 movies in between Oculus and Gerald's Game. So Ben, why don't you talk to us a little bit about Gerald's Game?
Sure. Gerald's Game is a Netflix movie this year, 2017. It's about a woman named Jessie. She goes on a little bit of a retreat with her husband Gerald out to the countryside, far from civilization, and they go out to try to spice up their sex life a little bit. So Gerald attaches her to the bedpost with handcuffs to try to spice things up a little bit. She gets kind of creeped out about how rapey he gets.
He gets very rapey.
Yeah, he gets very rapey with it. But right before he relents and take the handcuffs off her, he has a heart attack and collapses on top of her. She's freaked out because obviously she's handcuffed with a dead body on top of her in the middle of nowhere, essentially. And so she pushes him off, and the rest of the movie is her as she tries to escape. The story was based on a Stephen King short.
No, it's a novel.
Oh, it's a novel? Mm-hmm. Okay. I actually haven't read anything about the book this was based on.
Yeah, I consider
Not on
myself
my radar.
a pretty big Stephen King fan, and I have actually never heard of the Gerald's Game novel. But Deep cut. But after the movie, I'm kind of intrigued to read it, I must say.
Well, that's where I might disagree a little bit. But let's get into that a little bit more. What do you guys think of Gerald's Game?
Well, one big thing about it is it's focused just around Carla Gugino's character, Jessie, is her name? Her just trying to figure out how the hell she's going to get out. We find out these are real handcuffs. Her husband, played by Bruce Greenwood, wanted to make sure he got the nice ones. The crappy ones just break if you pull on them too hard.
That's right.
And they are on a reinforced bedpost as well, which also, fun fact, that part of the bed was made out of the mirror from Oculus.
Yeah, the headboard is a conversion of the mirror,
So,
which is
good
pretty cool.
repurposing.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Always got to recycle. And a lot of the movie depends on the acting. Also, we see, like we had in movies like Hush, which we did not talk about much. In Hush, the lead actress, she's deaf, but we see her mind or her thought process played out by sort of like a second character of herself talking to her as she's trying to work things out. And in Gerald's game, she sees her manifestation of Gerald talking to her, taunting her as she's trying to get out, and herself also.
There's also a dog that earlier in the movie she saw outside of the house.
And give her some of that nice Kobe beef. $200 a portion. So.
Yeah, so she gave the dog some food, and then later, after Gerald is collapsed, the dog breaks into the house.
Well,
somehow.
they leave the front door open.
Oh yeah, that's right.
When he pulls her inside so they can go to the bedroom, they accidentally leave the front door open, so that's how the dog gets in. But yeah, then the dog comes in and starts snacking on Gerald's corpse.
Right, yes, which adds more of a ticking time bomb suspense to it, because soon enough the dog will eat enough of Gerald before he wants fresher meat, and so she's got to try and get out before the dog starts aiming.
I feel like
sights on her.
having dogs in survival horror movies like this is kind of a trope at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, you have like wolf dogs in Frozen, the 2010 one where they're stuck on a ski lift.
Oh God, right.
You have dogs in The Grey, which is that Liam Neeson one where he's stuck in the wilderness. I don't think it was done poorly in this movie. Don't get me wrong.
No.
I thought the dog was a good touch.
They make a point because Jessie, we find out that her childhood, there was something very traumatic that happened to her, which led her to be around people who are sort of scummy. We see through Bruce Greenwood's the hallucination version of him that there were a lot of reservations she had about his character and the way he would act in sometimes very sexually aggressive ways, and it all ties back into...
Well, that's the thing. We learn why she's so put off by his sex games, because when she was like 12 or something like that, during a solar eclipse, her dad like had him sit on her lap while he masturbated, something like that.
Right, no, I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
So yeah, and then later convinces her to not like tell anybody about it. And like they make a point to say that like he never actually raped her or anything like that, or never did anything after that, but that it was still a traumatic enough experience, understandably, that she's got lots of hang-ups. And I think that that's really the thing that sets her off the most when after he's handcuffed her and he starts like calling himself daddy, and that like really freaks her out, understandably.
I thought the release of this movie was incredibly timely. I mean, with all the pedophilia shit coming out lately.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like, I know they wrote and shot this movie before that all came to light, but the fact that it was released when it was...
Yeah, I feel like that's
crazy.
Just coincidence more than anything else. But that's a really good point. And most of this movie, is her dealing with her hallucinations and trying to survive and figure out a way to escape. But she also at night continues to see an apparition of this like tall, deformed man in raggedy clothes with like this bag of bones and trinkets. And there's a lot of trinkets in Mike Flanagan movies, huh? Her hallucination of Gerald tells her that this man is death, is the personification of death, and that the reason she keeps seeing him is because she's going to die chained to that bed because she's not going to be able to escape.
Yeah, well, that's one of the big things. After he dies and after the dog comes out to eat, she starts really hallucinating hard and seeing herself and Gerald, and they're all trying to talk to help her try to figure out what to do and kind of unpack the situation.
Well, her hallucination of herself is the one we're trying to help her out. She realized there's a cup of water, because the reason why Bruce Greenwood has the heart attack in the first place is because he's taking Viagra, and so
and he takes more than one, right?
I don't remember how many he takes, but however many he took, it gives him that heart attack. But there's a cup of water he left on like a little headboard above the bed, and so she's able to slide that down to her and drink it through like a straw she makes out of a tag from her dress. So they do those little moments where she has to become inventive to try and survive, but Bruce Greenwood's hallucination is there to mainly taunt her.
Yeah.
And to sort of belittle her.
He OD'd on Viagra.
Yes, yeah.
And, I thought a lot of the survival elements were really clever. I thought the cup of water especially, she first struggles to get it off of the headboard without tipping over and falling. And once she does, she tries to pull it to her mouth and it's not far enough with the handcuffs. Yeah. I thought that was a really clever twist.
I thought that was cool too, and how we see her like pulling the tag off of her her lingerie earlier in the movie and setting it up on the shelf, and then she has the idea to grab that and roll it up into a straw that she can use to drink the water. There's like those little things, these little touches, and granted I don't know how much of that is actually in the Stephen King book. I think all that stuff is really quite inventive. I will shamefully admit that I did fall asleep for a few minutes during this movie because I was kind of drunk, not because I was bored. I just had a long day at work and I was tired and a little bit drunk, and I fell asleep around the middle, so I missed some of the stuff, but I came back to it for the end.
Oh man.
Should we go ahead and talk about the end?
This movie, great hour and 20-30 minutes at the beginning, and one of the worst fucking endings I've seen in a while.
Right. Well, so the way that she finally realizes how she can escape from the handcuffs is this is back in her childhood, after her father's talked to her and told her not to tell anybody and apologized. She's at dinner and her father is talking to her mom about how they had a good time while they were away. And she breaks the glass of juice or milk or whatever she has, and it causes her hand to bleed, which sparks in her mind the idea that if she can cut her hand on the glass, the water glass, that she can use that blood as a sort of lubricant to stick her hand out. And in what is a pretty gruesome moment.
That's a very gruesome scene.
It's very graphic. It really is something that should be seen, because
it's really only like the only real gore in the entire movie. Like we know that, like we see the dog eating Gerald's corpse, but it's sort of obscured by the edge of the bed, so we only really hear it more than see it.
Yeah.
And the scene where she finally escapes is gruesome, because in the act of pulling her hand out from the handcuff, she basically like rips all the skin off of her hand like a glove.
Yeah.
And that is just gruesome.
When they first introduced that, of her having to break the glass and like cut herself, it gave me a lot of Saw vibes.
Yeah.
Having to cut yourself out. But somehow in execution, it was more visceral and disgusting than even Saw was.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, in Saw, when Cary Elwes cuts off his foot, you don't really see it too much, but you see, like, the skin of her hand being pulled up and the muscle and tendons underneath, and it's really quite gruesome. Yeah. Really good. Really well done. But then once she finally manages to escape, she sees the Moonlight Man, as he's called, the personification of death or whatever in the kitchen as she's leaving, and she drops her wedding ring into his bag of trinkets. And then, yes, we get to the extremely disappointing ending where
she escapes, and then it cuts to 6 months later.
Something like that.
And so the whole time with the Moonlight Man, you have some great symbolism and, play with metaphor, with the Moonlight Man being the personification of death, and moonlight being connected with, the solar eclipse.
Right.
And it's a really cool duality, and the fact that she leaves her ring with him kind of symbolizes that she's moved on.
Right.
And that all felt really good. And then they cut to 6 months later and have to explain the Moonlight Man in detail.
In the fact that he was actually not a hallucination, and that he was like a serial killer and grave robber / necrophiliac who had been plaguing the town, which they do outright call Fairhope, which was jarring for me because I was not expecting that. And that he's been caught and he's going to jail. And the reason he didn't do anything to her is because he only kills and mutilates men. It's he's gay, and it's some kind of weird sex thing.
I thought he fucked both dead men and dead women, but he only mutilated the guys.
Yeah,
afterwards.
something like that. And then so the final scene is her going to his trial or whatever, and
she busts into the middle of the trial as they're announcing the verdict, walks down the aisle loudly, and then
it's hey, just interrupts it, and then she's you don't, or you look so small or something like that, and then leaves
and walks into the middle of the street.
Yeah, and walks away in the middle of the street. It should be mentioned that the Moonlight Man is played by Carell Struycken, who is the giant in Twin Peaks. So that was nice, and his whole design and makeup is all very good, I think. And okay, so here's my thing with this, and I was talking to Eugene about this earlier today. As I was going to bed after watching this movie and thinking about it, I don't mind at all that the Moonlight Man was actually a real person, a physical threat rather than just a hallucination. That in and of itself did not bother me. What bothered me is that they just tacked it on to the end. That's what pissed me off.
It undercut him being real. I think it undercut the power of the metaphor with death and moving on.
I disagree, because even though he was real, she thought she was hallucinating him. So he still represents what she thought he did. But it adds an added aspect that she was actually in physical danger from an external source as well. So that's
kind of bullshit, because we had the dog too, and that was an external force that was an actual danger. Why tack on another one? And why give him not shitty, but colored contacts if he was a real person?
Well, right. And I mean, that blurs.
Why give him spooky eyes?
Well, he only has spooky eyes when she falls asleep and she dreams that he's there. Whenever he's actually there, he doesn't have the spooky eyes.
They still looked kind of spooky.
Right. Well, he's supposed to be deformed, He's tall, and he's got the fucked up head and hands and shit. So the fact that he's real really doesn't bother me. It just feels, to explain it the way they did, just tacked on there at the end, and then to have her go to the courtroom and confront him, that shit was all really stupid. If they had found a better way to incorporate him being real into it, I think I would have been okay with it. But it felt like an afterthought. I wouldn't say that it hurts the movie too much, because the whole like first hour and a half of the movie is good. It's genuinely good. It's just then that part at the end that feels like tacked on garbage. So I feel like I would watch this movie again and get enjoyment out of it. But that was a very frustrating way to end an otherwise very good movie, I think.
Oh, man. Did not stick the landing at all.
No.
Honestly, I think this is one of those cases where the last 10 minutes, for me, ruins a lot of the power of the rest of the movie. I think the ending undercut a lot of what the movie was trying to do and cheapened it. They play with the Moonlight Man very secondary to the main action of the story in the majority of the movie, and then suddenly they have to explain it all away as kind of the central villain, when that's not the central antagonist of the movie, and that totally cheapens the rest of it.
I agree. I even would not have had so much of a problem with it if they still had him being like caught at the end, but if she had just been like looking through a newspaper or something and saw his picture, and then she had her realization herself that he was actually there, and then maybe leave some of his motivations and stuff a bit more ambiguous, and then just wrap it up in a different way, to have them just like through voiceover narration to explain him and who he is and what he was doing, and then have her go to his trial at the end like he's the reason for everything that happened. Like she has to confront him at the trial in order to be free of this traumatic experience. That shit was dumb, because that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it was really dumb. And the thing is, They play with the Moonlight Man originally in the movie in a really interesting way, and they argue, if you die alone, how do you know what you see, before you die? Because if they're alone, you can't give that information to someone else.
Right. It's like a whole if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it kind of thing.
Yeah, so they play with the Moonlight Man in that way, in that, like, They give the idea of people dying alone often die of fear, of fright, because they see an apparition like the Moonlight Man, who's supposed to be, a stand-in for death. And if they would have played that up a little bit more, I think that would have been a little bit more effective. If they would have implied that, other people die of fright. But even that is over-explaining, in my opinion. They didn't need to put anything in here, honestly.
No, that is the big problem with it, is that they over-explain it at the end, and in a way that feels like an afterthought, and that's really the biggest problem with it. Otherwise, I still think it's a pretty good movie overall. Like I think the acting is really good across the board. Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood both do a really good job, and the interplay between them. And also, I really like how, aside from like the flashbacks and the very end, it all, it's contained to just like the bedroom.
Yeah.
The central location, like, which is something in films that I always really like if it's done well.
Yeah, single location movies are usually really, really good if they're done well.
Yeah. I think, you could even say that if when watching this movie, after the scene where she escapes and she puts her wedding ring in the Moonlight Man's bag of bones and trinkets, just roll credits right there. Solid movie.
Yeah, very, honestly, very once she crashes the car and the lights on the neighbor's house turn on, just turn off the movie.
Yeah.
You don't have to go on from there, because all you get after that is the shitty explanation of the Moonlight Man, and then you get a heavy-handed, I started a foundation for kids that were touched.
Yeah.
And I tell my story every day.
Tacked on. Yeah, which also felt really tacked on.
And because you get all the closure you need from the wedding ring being dropped in the box and her escape. You get a lot of that through the story itself, and you don't need an explanation.
Well, yeah, exactly. Her putting the ring into the bag is really all the closure we need. It's like she has, through this traumatic experience, been able to come to terms with her father's abuse and her true feelings about her husband, you know, and why their marriage was deteriorating prior to this. And that's really like, that's the moment when she puts it in there. Like, that's the closure. She's moved on. She has come out of this alive and has become a stronger person through it. If they just rolled credits after that, that would have been okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's the ending where it really falls apart. And I would still definitely recommend this movie because I do think it's a good movie.
Do you think that was a Netflix thing, the ending, or a Stephen King thing?
I don't know. I can't say. I would say that it's probably a Stephen King thing, but knowing Stephen King, it's probably handled way better in the book.
There's some Stephen King books where he just does not stick the landing.
Yes.
You know, so I wouldn't be too surprised.
I don't know. Maybe I'll read it and find out. But I think it's significant to note that this is the third good Stephen King adaptation to come out this year. This fall, actually. It, 1922, and this. And then one bad one, The Dark Tower, which I finally saw and was fucking awful. Insultingly bad. Surprise. I knew it would be, but after I finished the book series, I was like, well, I have to watch it.
I heard that they reshot like 90% of that movie.
It's an insulting oversimplification of a really fantastic series of books. But I'm not going to get into that. Should we go ahead and rate this and then move on to our game?
Yes, let's do it.
I'll start this one. No need to rehash what I said. I feel like I expressed myself pretty clearly. I'm going to give this a solid 4 out of 5. The ending aside, the rest of it was something I was on board with. So, Eugene?
Yeah, same for me, honestly. 4 out of 5. I think that Carly Gugino does a great job, Bruce Greenwood, and besides those last 5-10 minutes, that everything else is really solid and should be seen. So check it out. Everyone has access to Netflix these days. You gotta fucking ask your parents, ask your friends. Just watch it.
Yeah.
Watch it.
This is one of those cases where normally I would agree with you guys 4 out of 5, but because they fucked up the landing and just whiffed the ending so badly, I have to knock at least half a star off. So I'm going to go with 3.5. Still worth checking out. Still a lot of good stuff. The majority of the movie is really great. That ending, though, awful. One of the worst horror endings I've seen in a long time. Honestly, like we said before, just turn the movie off, you know, right when they cut to black, and kind of jump forward in time. All of that, it's garbage.
Yeah, just stop watching there, really. You'll have a much better movie experience, I think.
Yeah, so I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5.
All right, so that gives us an average of 3.8 out of 5 pods. Still good. Yeah, I think Mike Flanagan is definitely a director to keep an eye out for in the future. He's not perfect, but he definitely shows a lot of promise, and when he's good, he's good. Shout out Mike Flanagan. Shout out Fairhope, Alabama. Roll Tide.
Yeah, of contemporary horror directors, he's definitely a name that should be checked out. I think he's kind of still underrated in terms of household name. Not someone who's on everyone's radar quite yet, but definitely a director worth checking out, and a contemporary director in terms of horror that has his own unique style.
Yeah, I think so. I think his style is really making itself apparent. You know, this is his 6th film, I think. And it's starting to get to a point where, like, I can watch it and I can watch his stuff and recognize the hallmarks of his directing style. And honestly, as good of a director as he is, I would say he's a better editor. So as long as he continues to edit his movies and grow as a director, I think he's really starting to find his swing. And I think we can expect some really great horror movies out of him in the future. I hope so, at least.
Yeah, the way Flanagan, externalizes the internal struggles of all the characters has become kind of signature in his movies and really is a unique hallmark of a lot of them. You don't really see that done quite as well in any other horror movie or any other movie, period. The way he does it is very unique and worth checking out for that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ben, so do you want to explain our game for this episode?
Absolutely. So, for the game we have this week, I have pulled some trivia from all of Mike Flanagan's movies, not just the ones we've seen. And I'll shout out a random piece of trivia, and you have to tell me what movie it's from.
All right. So that's all we're doing is just naming the movie that the trivia corresponds to.
Yep.
Okay.
And you guys have to guess.
All right. Cool.
What feature had the first appearance of the Oculus mirror in it?
I mean, I want to say Absentia. I haven't seen any of his other student films, so.
You said what feature?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so that's Absentia onward. I'm gonna say Absentia.
Yeah, no, I said Absentia.
Okay, yeah. So it has a little cameo early on.
I actually noticed that in the shrink's office, right?
Yeah,
hanging on the wall while they're
cool.
talking it's the mirror from the short film, obviously not from the feature.
This movie was filmed in 18 days.
Huh. I think I'm gonna say Hush because I know that one is a pretty small.
I'm also gonna say
Oh, you
Hush.
son of a bitch!
Well, it's Hush.
Fuck yeah! We're both so good.
Oh man, this film had virtually no soundtrack.
Well, I know it's not Oculus because I mentioned the music in that. I know it's not Absentia because it had that really obnoxious two-tone theme throughout the entire thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say Gerald's Game.
I'm gonna say Before I I'm gonna say Before I Wake.
It was Gerald's Game.
Bada boom!
No.
Realest guy in the room.
So I have one more and then a little bonus.
Okay.
I have a feeling that you might both get both of these, so we'll see. So in this movie, most of the pictures inside of the house that was shot had pictures of water or reflections of water within the picture frames.
Water.
Yeah.
I actually don't know this one. Gerald's Game, I guess, since it's right on Mobile Bay.
Oh shit! I'm gonna say the Ouija movie.
It was Oculus. All of the pictures have in the picture frames have reflections.
That was
stuff like
that's
that.
reflection is what made me think of Oculus, but then also because Gerald's Game is set on the water, I thought, oh well, maybe water, maybe Gerald's Game. All right, shit. So we both did bad at that one, Eugene.
Yes, we did.
All right.
Okay,
So what's the last one?
I'll give Eugene a chance to come back for this one.
Okay.
So what 3 movies did Mike Flanagan direct in 2016?
In 2016.
Is this just for Eugene, or am I answering this too?
Well, the thing is, if one of you answers, that kind of answers it for...
Okay, yeah, all right.
I'm gonna say Hush, Ouija, and Before I Wake.
Correct.
Hey.
Okay, so...
So how are we going to break this tie?
Yeah, this is a tie. Okay. What was the budget for Absentia? Whoever gets closest will win.
The budget?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say like $300,000.
Eugene?
I'm gonna go much lower than that. I think for Absentia it was probably like 25 grand, 30
Oh
grand.
wow, yeah, you are going way lower than that.
So
I mean,
it was actually 70 grand.
Fuck, I went way over.
woo.
Oh my
Eugene
god.
turned it around in
Right.
the last minute.
Fuck, fuck,
good
fuck, fuck.
shit.
All right.
Okay, yeah, that's
so
a good one.
next
Go.
week we are doing an early Peter Jackson
P-Jax.
retrospective. So we're
Which I'm very excited
watching
about.
Dead Alive. We are watching The Frighteners, and the third movie we're watching, Eugene.
Well, I'm going to be choosing Bad Taste. I have not seen that movie, and so I think it would be a good one to talk about.
All right, I could get down with that too. I have seen Bad Taste, but I did fall asleep partway through it, so it'll be good to see it again.
Solid lineup.
Solid lineup. Yeah, I'm excited. This will be I think this will be a good episode. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening, as always. We've pretty well got our show map laid out for the rest of 2017, but we have yet to start setting up things for 2018. We'd love to hear from some of the listeners, so tweet at us or post on our Facebook page, Pod People Pod, for both of those. Let us know some themes that you might like to see in 2018, or even specific movies that you like to see, or directors. And yeah, we'd love to get some community involvement in that. You can follow us on Letterboxd as well for our ratings of these movies. Pod People Podcast on Letterboxd. The show is produced by Ben Sheets, who also does our entrance music. Entrance music, like we're fucking wrestlers. I watch too much wrestling. The show is edited by yours truly. You can catch us on any of your favorite podcast resources. If you like the show, leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It'd be really great so we can get some more exposure and turn some people on to some horror movies. Do you guys have anything else you'd like to plug before we sign out?
Not I. No.
Nope.
All right. Well, I am Matisse Van Rossum.
I'm Ben Sheets.
I'm Eugene Lundeen.
And I guess we're gonna have to get Eugene back to the hospital to get his hook wounds taken care of. So
Yeah, is
we'll,
it bleeding? Is there pus? Is there pus?
yes, you have been leaking a lot. I'm gonna have to clean the floor thoroughly after this. So
Lost my sight a little while ago, so.
I'm not surprised.
All right, yes, we'll have to close it all off. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you for listening. Catch us again next time. Bye.
Goodbye.